First, a few facts. Buddhism is the fourth largest of the world's great religions, with over 400 million adherents in various traditions. There are traditions that emerged as Buddhism spread throughout Asia. It's based on the teachings and the insights of who we know as the Buddha. He lived 2,500 years or so ago. The dates are not, there's, with anything religious, there's conflict in terms of nailing down the specific dates. But he lived in northern India, the Nepal border region up in northern India. He began life as a prince with everything given to him, everything provided for him, except a mother. His mother died when he was just 10 months old. She had had a dream that he would become either a great leader or, that didn't happen, a holy man, a great holy man. His father wanted him to become a prince, so he kept him in the palace, not against his own free will. He wanted to stay, of course, because everything was provided for him. Everything he desired was provided for him. He married a beautiful princess. And they had great sex. I mean, you can read about it. They had amazing, amazing sex. There's a story where they were having sex on the roof and they fell into a lotus blossom garden. Didn't hurt either one of them. He experienced all kinds of just all his desires met, all his whims met. One day he traveled outside the walls of the palace. And he saw 4 different things on 4 different journeys. He saw suffering. He saw death. He saw hunger and want. He saw deep, deep suffering in the world. And having never experienced suffering, that shocked him. The 4th thing he saw was a holy man who was meditating. And he determined, Buddha had a son. And so he wrestled with going on a quest to discover enlightenment. He didn't know that's what he was questing for. He was questing for meaning. He was questing for the holy. He was questing for understanding. He was questing to touch a part of himself and understand an aspect of himself and the world in which he lived. He came, of course, out of what we know now as Hinduism, this tradition of understanding the world through this gods and goddesses and the actions of a pantheon of gods and goddesses that, you know, has become to be more understood as one god expressed in 3,000, 4,000 different ways. But Buddha went on this quest out of that, deep into ritual, deep into discovering meditative practices, seeking to be with holy men, even being for 6 years very much of an ascetic. Just denying oneself everything. In none of these practices, in none of these experiences did he find the fulfillment that he was looking for, the meaning that he was looking for. After 6 years or so, he went and sat under the Bodhi tree in a place that you can still go to. The fig tree type that's still there. And he sat there and meditated again. on what he had not found, what he had not reached as far as enlightenment. The wrestling with his own desires that is expressed in the story as a god, Mara, coming and tempting him with all these things. But he did not give in to the temptation. And it's in that meditation that he is said to have reached enlightenment. And he sat there for a few more days. And then he began to speak to followers. And it was on the day that is celebrated tomorrow, called Ashapara, am I getting that right? That he proclaimed what he did in his meditations and discovery and in his out of his enlightenment. 4 noble truths. And that's what we're going to talk about and delve into today. I'm a novice at this. I've not studied Buddhism. There are others in this community who can probably straighten out a lot of what I just said. The intention of our digging into this today, again, is to discover what is it from this rich tradition that we can draw on. That's one of the wonderful things about Unitarian Universalism is we don't say we got it right. There's always more to learn and more to discover. And rich traditions to draw on from all these different faiths and practices. And if you want to explore more, great. I encourage you to do so. There is a lot of richness in Buddhism. My purpose, as I said, is to begin to explore these basic concepts and to relate them to the emerging religious context of contemporary society. Especially to the concept of coexist. How do we bring these elements together? Or how can these religious traditions in our world coexist without violence? Even in Buddhism, as it expressed today, I read this a couple of weeks. There's a Buddhist monk who's leading a violent resistance, or others see it as actually violent action. So Buddhism is not perfect as it is expressed. None of these religions should be put on the pedestal of perfection. I'll also explore Buddhist principles which inspire us. Specifically, these 4 noble truths. Dharma Day is what is celebrated tomorrow. Asala Puja. The day commemorates, as I said, the first sermon that Buddha gave under the Bodhi tree, explaining these 4 noble truths. It began with one who said, I think I get it. And there were 5, and then there were thousands. And now there are hundreds of thousands, millions. The 4 noble truths state that, first, there is suffering, stress, loss. The second noble truth, the origin of suffering is attachment, craving, clinging. Third noble truth, that cessation of suffering is attainable. The fourth noble truth, that there is a path to the cessation of suffering, the middle way, the Eightfold Path. Many, in interpreting Buddha, talk about Buddha being like a physician, that he analyzes the illness as suffering, that there's a cure, letting go of things, that there's a prescription, which is the middle way, the Eightfold Path, of following and practicing mindfulness is a subtle way of saying that. So what we're going to do is a little practice on this. I'm going to offer, again, the Noble Truth, a reflection on the Noble Truth, and then a brief meditation from your own experiences. One of the aspects of Buddhism that is unique, and that, not unique probably, but of the major religions is that the source is really within. You have the ability within your own mind, your own soul, to get this prescription. It doesn't come from some deity, some god, or some other mysterious source to fix what is broken, to make well what is not well. You have this within you. All human beings have this within us, within our own minds, to discover and become enlightened. So these Four Noble Truths are the start of that path. So in your meditations, think within your own experiences. I'm not asking you to think outside, to draw anything from external, but really to draw on your own resources, your own experiences, your own learning in your meditation to experience what Buddha is talking about. So the first noble truth, there is suffering, stress, loss that is the common experience of all humanity. When an infant is born, one of the first things they do is cry because of the separation. They cry for someone to come and be with them, to hold them, to provide for them, to meet their desires. And we are all infant in so many ways. That's what we cry for. We long for connection. We long for what we do not have. We long for, and we suffer for, and we desire some things. So in our meditation, I want you to close your eyes. And to remember a loss. Remember and feel your own experience of suffering. It may be recent, it may be longer ago. Breathe in. Breathe out. Feel and connect with those feelings. Open your eyes. The second noble truth is that the origin of suffering is attachment, craving, clinging. Suffering comes from something. We desire, we seek, we want. Again, common to all human beings. We want, therefore we suffer. It's not that the desire is bad or good, it just is. That suffering is bad or good, it just is. But it keeps us in trap. Buddhism comes out of Hinduism, so reincarnation is an aspect and understanding in it, that we are reincarnated again and again and again and again and again in many different forms. Buddha himself had dreams about previous lives where he was a dung beetle, where he was an elephant, where he was a lizard, where he was other humans, many humans throughout time. And again and again and again, the cycle is repeated because we hang on, we do not let go of suffering and our craving and our desires. That is the repeated illness. So Buddha says that if we are able to let go, if we are able to release our cravings, we can move on. So in our next meditation, I want you to focus and reflect on a deep desire. And then I'll guide through a brief process. a deep desire. It may be something you really, really want. Something new. Your stomach may be beginning to rumble and you want lunch. Could be anything. So close your eyes. Reflect on a deep desire. Breathe in. Breathe out. This time, breathe in and hold. 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 And release. And open your eyes. We want to hold. We want to possess. We want to have. We crave, cling. But life is letting go as well as breathing in. Breath is a great example. Bringing in, letting go. Bringing in, letting go. Though we crave and we long for the oxygen that feeds our bodies, we can only hold it in so long before we let it go and release it. The third noble truth is that cessation of suffering is attainable. That it can be let go. That we can find this release from this cycle of suffering. That what Buddha spoke of with the language of the time and the day, and that has come into our own language, known as nirvana. Enlightenment is the release from this suffer, desire cycle. By letting go of desire, by letting go of, in effect, moving beyond the self. This is where it gets all what we know and hear and has come into our own thinking in the West as Jungian psychology. That idea of self. Freud touched on it, but really Carl Jung really expressed it well. That we can move beyond just this selfishness, this self-desire, this self. Seeing ourselves as separate, moving into more of a oneness, an experience of being with and of all things. So the next meditation is on letting go. You've let go of things. We've all let go of things that we desire. I think of a girlfriend back in college. Man, oh man, I was pitiful. I really wanted that relationship to work out. You might have something similar. A year later, it meant nothing. Isn't that amazing? I was suffering. I was pitiful. But a year and a half later, there's Karen. So much better. So, think of your own experience of something you desired. Maybe the same thing you just meditated on. But reflect on it as letting that go. Releasing that desire. Ceasing that feeling. So close your eyes. Move through in your memory and your mind the story. How much you want it. How you let go. And how the feeling and the thoughts shifted. It is possible to let go. Breathe in, breathe out. The fourth noble truth is that Buddha discovered and shared a path. This, what he called, or what has come to be known as the Eightfold Path, the middle way. It is possible. And the Eightfold Path is a series, this is the prescriptions. And if you want, this symbol we have for Buddhism, the wheel that's on the front of the bulletin and on here, is the symbol of that Eightfold Path. As I said, this is where Buddhism moves from this personal into practice, into what has become ritualized, into these monastic communities where the Eightfold Path is really dug into. Where laity, non-monastics, can also experience and learn about the Eightfold Path. There's a lot of ethics in the way that we live and the choices that we make, those sorts of things. I encourage you to look into and discover the Eightfold Path. So, understanding is one thing. Knowing that there's a path to be able to cease suffering, to let go, is one thing. Practicing it, living it, is quite another. And that's where the practice of mindfulness, the practice that is Buddhism, comes into play. So, mindfulness, or practicing mindfulness, is an important aspect of this. A good place to start. So that's where our meditation is going to focus. The awareness that you have had today of that seeking, knowing suffering, desiring, knowing that that's where the suffering comes from. Knowing that you have been able to let it go in the past, you can let go on and on and on in your life. You can even become practiced at doing this with everything. Of moving beyond that need to hold on and the suffering that comes from that. So reflect on that experience that you've had today. The experience of letting go. The experience of moving into mindfulness. So close your eyes one more time. Breathe in. Breathe out. And sit with Buddha under the Bodhi tree. Breathe in, breathe out, and return. Thanks for taking that little journey with me. A little bit of context, a little bit more of context. Buddhism, as I said, emerged 2,500 years ago as an ancient ritual tradition where it emerged in a context where Hinduism, or what we know as Hinduism today, had lost its meaning. And there were many who were seeking, not just the Buddha, not just Siddhartha. There were many who were wandering and moving away from the rituals tradition that had lost its meaning. It's interesting to note that during the same period, a lot of the similar things were happening across the globe. That the ancient traditions that had become ritualized in sacrificial practices or other things, others were discovering, and this was a time where the individual, the human in and of themselves, that was beginning to emerge culturally. This concept of self. And it's in that those rituals of community or of gods being influential and being subject to gods and the whims of gods and goddesses began to be meaningless. And Buddha and others begin to explore and seek a deeper meaning. And think about it. 2,500 years ago, 2,000 years ago, 1,500 years ago is when the great religious traditions that we think about now across the globe emerged. Buddhism, Christianity, Islam, all emerged during that time period. What was going on? What was going on? And the question is, what's going on now, 2,000 years later? But many religious scholars see a connection in how Buddhism evolved from religious ritualism of earlier Hinduism, how Christianity evolved from the religious ritualism of early Jewish temple practices, and even how Judaism evolved from the temple to the diaspora and the practices of the synagogue. Often from sacrificial ritual to text story-based practices. Fascinating. As Buddhism came into the West in the early stages or in the stages of globalization, as trade and other things happened, Buddhism's influence emerged in the U.S. beginning in the late 1800s and early 1900s. First in literature, then in the human sciences, especially in Jungian psychology, as we talk about. And in the latter half of the century, last century, and today, there continues to be a growing appeal of Buddhist practices and thought. Although often adapted or misinterpreted, or really practiced in yoga, in meditation, and in the concept of mindfulness. Think about how much in this community, but in other places, where those concepts of meditation, practicing yoga, being mindful, how much that language comes out, how much those practices are seen. Think about it, 60, 70, 50 years ago, 40 years ago, 30 years ago, that was not as common. Not as accepted. Here in Boone, there's yoga that happens every day of the week in 20 different places. There's now acro yoga, which is partnering yoga. There's hot yoga. There's fast yoga, which sounds contradictory. But there's a lot of different things going. And I encourage you to explore those things and practice those things, but also discover the roots of those practices for yourself. So, coexistence. Buddhism inspires all to practice mindfulness, to become aware of these Four Noble Truths and the Eightfold Path. Thank you. Buddhism in the West is understood as much a philosophy as a religion. Perhaps because of its non-theism. Notice when I talked about Buddhism, I kind of talked about it and the Four Noble Truths and didn't bring in God. Buddha really never talks about God. So there is a non-theism, a non-deism. It's, again, not about a God acting. It's about human action and human ability and the human mind being able to attain achievement. There's really not talk about an afterlife, other than the reincarnation concept, but past nirvana, past enlightenment, it's not talked about. So it's different in Buddhism is different in the sense that Christianity There is Christ, there is God, there is the Holy Spirit, actors in human life. Judaism, certainly God. Islam, certainly Allah, God, acting in the world. Buddhism, it's really here. Therefore, many find it possible to link and be both Christian and Buddhist. I have friends who are Presby Buddhists or Episcopal Buddhists, they call themselves. There's Jubu. You could look it up. Jewish and Buddhist. And certainly there are UU Buddhists. Buddhism seems to coexist well with other faiths. Thought, practice, approach are not contradictory to deistic faiths. And it inspires, certainly inspires, including UUs, that there is the ability to transcend, to evolve beyond suffering, seeking, desire, which causes us pain, fear, death. And the possibility to achieve sustained enlightenment, nirvana. There's an appeal to that, even for the UU mind. Human beings, individually, collectively, matter. Not only is that mattering up to God, but we matter in and of ourselves. Buddhist principles and teachings seem to be consistent with the UU principles that we shared earlier in today's service. That the individual is important, that we are interconnected in the web of all being, those concepts. And again, there's an appeal to UU that this is a human-based practice, religion, non-theistic spirituality. In the UUA, there's over 100 UUA Buddhist fellowships. And according to some recent study, 9% of UUs consider themselves Buddhist, and 25% are influenced by Buddhist thought. Lots to learn and experience in Buddhism. Yeah.
Since it's on topic, I want to make sure that everyone knows that there is in fact a group that meets here at the fellowship on Tuesday evenings. We meditate together and have discussions about mindfulness. Runs from 5:30 to 7 on Tuesdays. If you're interested in coming, we'd just love to have you. If you're interested in being on the email list, you could let me know.
And as I said, I am a novice, just beginning to learn. Are there those who know a bit more, who practice, who dug a bit deeper, who would be willing to share with anybody, talk to anybody who has dug in a little bit more into Buddhism, if folks are wanting to explore? Raise your hand if you are. Susie? There are others in the community, certainly, and I would encourage you to, as I said, to explore for yourselves. But Buddhism does inform us. A lot, others would say that early UU folk, or 18th century, 19th century UU folks, Thoreau is often called a pre-Buddhist. And others who were very informing of the UU tradition. So thanks for listening, thanks for sharing, thanks for taking this journey with me. Let's move on.